Back on May 27th, NBA insider Shams Charania prophesied that this offseason might be the craziest ever. Well, that was obviously a lie. But underneath the surface of a monotonous summer, a monumental shift had been taking place, one that will shape how rosters are built for the rest of the decade. After 15 years of player empowerment, owners are digging their heels in an effort to claw back control, one RFA at a time. Welcome back, everybody. If you're new here, I hope you stick around and enjoy the video. Today, we'll be diving into the NBA's RFA problem. If you don't know, RFA just means restricted free agent. I'll be referring to it as RFA from here on out. I can't think of the last time that an RFA class has gotten this much attention. Typically, we see RFAs come to terms on new deals fairly early in the offseason, but we're like 40 days away from the start of the season, and players like Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga, and Quentin Grimes are still in limbo. The gap between what these players expect to be paid and what teams are willing to pay seems significantly higher than normal, but what's causing this issue? Are players asking too much, or are teams getting too stingy? In today's video, I'll be exploring the NBA's RFA issue and how it shows no signs of stopping anytime soon. For each player currently stuck in this RFA limbo, the holdup is slightly different, but overall there is a common reservation each team shares, and that's giving up flexibility for an imperfect player, which is completely valid from a team building perspective, but in years past, it kind of didn't seem to matter as much. By nature, restricted free agency puts the team in control. They can throw offers out, and it's typically the player's best interest to just accept the highest amount they offer, even if it's less than what they expect. Looking at the main players of this offseason, we see that the Bulls aren't convinced on Giddey as their main star. The Sixers are hesitant to commit long-term money to Grimes when the team already has 2 albatross contracts and likely wants to have flexibility in 2027, and the Warriors have soured their relationship with Kuminga beyond repair. Over in Brooklyn, they made it clear that Cam Thomas was not a main building block and preferred to keep their cap sheet clear for future moves, which signaled to Cam that taking a measly qualifying offer and betting on himself next year was the best course of action. In all likelihood, Cam Thomas will hit unrestricted free agency next summer and leave Brooklyn for nothing. Typically, it's seen as bad asset management to let your leading scorer leave for nothing, but Brooklyn doesn't really seem to care. Cam Thomas kind of has this rep of a good stats bad team guy and is not a good defender, so it seems like he simply doesn't fit into the team Brooklyn is trying to build, especially when he's asking for Tyler Hero or RJ Barrett money. It seems to me like both parties hold some responsibility in the problem. The players still expect to get paid like it was 2023, while the front offices have pivoted to life in the new CBA and under the harsh restrictions have had to start making sacrifices. Which brings me to what I view as the main culprit of the problem, the new CBA. Prior to the new CBA, the RFA market was one of the least exciting things about the offseason. Apart from the DeAndre Ayton offer sheet drama, we rarely saw friction on RFA deals, with the big-name RFAs happily signing multi-year deals in excess of 9 figures. But the introduction of these new penalties under the CBA has changed the way teams are using their cap space. As teams try to navigate these aprons, we're already seeing trends like upperclassmen being drafted higher to provide immediate contributions on cheap contracts, and former top picks who were never given the chance to show what they've got being cut in favor of win-now players. Simply put, contending teams have less patience for prospects than they've ever had, as carrying their contract could have devastating implications for their cap flexibility. We see this most notably with the Golden State Warriors and Jonathan Kuminga, who at just 22 still has a high ceiling, but the team is cautious to commit any flexibility to a guy who still isn't won the favor of head coach Steve Kerr. This is an issue that will continue to compound as star players' salaries grow in excess of $70 million per season. The players you put around your star becomes more crucial than ever. The name of the game is to get role players that complement your star while returning more value than their contract costs. Because of this, I think we're headed for a reality where teams draft more NBA-ready seniors, keep them for about 4 years before they need to be extended, and let them walk, and then replace them with the next batch. I could be wrong, but this seems like where we're headed, as there are plenty of talented players who are currently not signed simply because a young role player can do what they can do for much cheaper. Writing a blank check to an RFA is certainly not the way to go either, so I'm not surprised that this shift is happening. When we look historically at RFAs who have underperformed compared to what their contract is, the reason for this starts to become more clear. My favorite example of this right now is Chicago's Patrick Williams, who signed a 5-year, $90 million extension with the Bulls in 2024. Williams, A former 4th overall selection is one of many players who drew unwarranted Kawhi comps during his draft cycle, and his performance since being drafted hasn't been bad, but it hasn't exactly lived up to his top 5 selection. So when the Bulls gave him $18 million a season, it was a bit surprising, but in the past, a top 5 pick was basically guaranteed to get extended. Most top 5 picks have a degree of upside, and teams are very reluctant to give up on a young player so early. In Williams' case, he has been able to be a serviceable 3-and-D player, but his offensive game is yet to develop to a point where he could be a main building piece. From the looks of things, the Bulls regret the years and money they committed to Williams, and I think if they had a do-over, they would shorten the term. Their experience with Williams is likely a huge factor in their hesitance to meet Josh Giddey's demands. It would be hard to see the Bulls as fielding a competitive roster if they ended up paying the duo of Williams and Giddey a combined $50 million. Fortunately for Giddey, it does sound like the two sides are getting close on a number in the mid-20s, and he will likely not be forced to settle for a qualifying offer. As I said, this RFA issue is likely to continue year over year, and looking ahead to next year's RFAs, I see a few players who are likely to fall into the RFA trap. Guys like Keegan Murray, Jaden Ivey, and Benedict Mathurin are all players that I think will be seeking in excess of $20 million a season, and given the current trend, I think they'll struggle to get it. Murray is at the mercy of one of the most confusing front offices in the league, so this could go two ways for him. Either he benefits from their irrationality and secures a huge bag, or he's left staring down the barrel of an insultingly low offer come next June. Jaden Ivey will certainly have the chance to prove his worth next decade next season, as the Pistons have pivoted very nicely from a historically bad 2024. The sticking point for Ivey's deal will likely come from what Jalen Duren and Ausar Thompson show this season. If they have breakout years, the Pistons front office may want to keep their powder dry for them rather than award Jaden Ivey with a big deal. The Pistons have a ton of young talent, and it could quickly become a dogfight for who can convince the front office that they deserve the biggest piece of the pie. Finally, Benedict Mathurin will have a huge opportunity this season to convince the Pacers that he is a long-term piece. The hurdles to that are their 2 max players, their desperate need for a starting center, and their history of letting RFAs expire. Mathurin is a player of extreme confidence and will no doubt look to get paid like the star that he feels he is. My worry is that the Pacers would disagree, and we'll see him as another qualifying offer guy come next September. So how does this problem get fixed? The new CBA continues to carve out the middle class and threatens the careers of many players who had previously secured long-term money without any issue. The resolution likely comes when the long-awaited league expansion finally happens. The NBA has their eyes set on Vegas and possibly Seattle as expansion teams, which means 36 more roster spots and over $300 million to spread around. If expansion were to happen today, guys like Kuminga, Grimes, and Giddey would not be protected by their team and subsequently would get plucked by an expansion roster. Those expansion rosters would have the cap space needed to give players closer to what they feel they deserve. Until then, I think the RFA trap will continue to grow, and if expansion doesn't happen soon, some tweaks to the CBA might be required. The most logical change to the CBA that I would like to see is changing the max extension rules so that supermax bonuses earned through incentives like making All-NBA don't count against the cap. Currently, the CBA essentially punishes teams for drafting well and having multiple young stars. This is an area where I would love to see some relief in, because teams like the Cavs and the Thunder, who have had some success with some young players, will likely have to make some very tough decisions very soon. As a fan, one of my favorite aspects of the NBA is following a young player's development and seeing how they settle into their teams. But the current RFA problem is on course to ruin this, as more and more teams start leaving their former top picks out to dry. The gravy train of RFA is over, and what remains is a swamp that more and more players will get stuck in. Until the rules change or the league expands, I expect to see more cases like Kuminga's and Thomas's. For the most part, an offseason that was hyped to be the craziest ever has been disappointing. But underneath the surface, a storm is brewing, and it will be interesting to see how next year and years forward, RFAs navigate this issue and how their agents help them avoid the RFA trap. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'm doing my best to decrease my lead time and ramp up for the season, so if you do enjoy what I'm doing, please subscribe or follow me on all platforms as @Raptors Shack. I'm pretty responsive on Twitter, so if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up there. Until next time, see ya.